what I found, Tim, was I can get 80% plus of the results I wanted out of my workday with just those 2 hours. And that was a paradigm shift for me. When we talk about work-life balance, that frees up a lot of time.
Welcome to another episode of The Powerful Man Show. I am Tim Matthews, and you are with the one and only Mr. Doug Holt. How are you, Doug?
Tim, I'm doing fantastic, man. How are you doing?
Very, very well. Very well indeed. So I want to dive straight into this because this is something that I struggled with this for a long time. I like to think that I have improved on this topic. I don't think there's any kind of completion, but I'm really interested to hear your take on it because you're a man that obviously lives with a great deal of flexibility and freedom. I don't think I've ever asked you this question, and just to keep on a bit of a cliffhanger as to what it is, it's also something that is one of the main problems for the men that we work with. You know, we have the Facebook group, the Activation Method. And one of the questions in there when the men apply to become a member is, what is the biggest problem you are struggling with right now? And I would say this question I'm about to ask you is the exact response that at least 90% of the men report as their problem. And that is, how do you achieve a work-life balance?
All right. So how many days do we have for this podcast? No, it can be done simply, right? It's a quest for a lot of people rather than necessarily an achievement. And the reason that people look at my lifestyle and see it as work-life balance is because I work on it, right? I make sure it's a priority. And to give credit where credit is due, Tim, you're the one that at one point called me out and said, "Hey, look, send me a screenshot of your calendar." Right. And that was during a time when I started to go back into hustle mode. I started a new business and I was working to get this up. And if I recall correctly, because it's about a year ago, you had looked at me and you said, "Hey, look, you're grinding again. Show me your calendar." And I was like, "Oh, crap." So that's one thing. And what we teach through the Powerful Man is the use of the coil, which you also came up with. What I do is I look at two things. I look at roles in my life. Like, what roles do I play? Business owner, husband, father, son. What are the roles that I'm playing in my life, and how important are those roles to me? Now, I'll come back to that in a minute because it's really important that you know the roles that you play, but also how important those roles are. Then I look at categories in my life. Now, we all have different categories, and we teach them slightly differently over time. But I look at it as a holistic area of my life because I know at one point, running multiple businesses, playing competitive sports, and just being an all-around social person, things can get out of balance really quickly. They can shift from just work to just play. And how do you find that balance where your work is going really well, but your health is going down? That's a really common one for business people. But vice versa, for a lot of other people, it could be, hey, their body's banging, everything else is going good, but their work is failing, or relationships. So the way that I do it, Tim, is I categorize it in, mind, body, soul, relationships, business. And then I also use fun, wealth, and growth. So those are my 8 categories that work for me. Now, when you and I coach people, we use different methodologies depending on the person. And we use the Powerful Man methodology, and then we evolve that depending if the people graduate that program, right? And they can get more in depth into the structure. So then what I'm going to do, Tim, is I'm going to list those out as well as my roles. And I'm going to make sure that they fit into my calendar. So something, for example, when I sent you my calendar, I remember at one point I'm complaining that I'm gaining weight, right? Here I am, I've got 18 degrees in fitness, right? 18 degrees in certifications. And here I am gaining weight and getting sloth-like to me, right? To somebody else, maybe not. But to me, I'm getting there. And so when you said, "Hey, Doug, send me a screenshot of your calendar," that's when I went, "Oh, crap." Because what I noticed right away is I had deleted my workouts from my calendar, right? And so I could add more things in, more business things in. And that's how you can get out of balance very quickly. It's a slippery slope that happens very fast. So again, you listing out these categories, and what do you want in these categories? What's really important for you to have? And they don't have to be tasks, but they could just be even time, right? So it could be in your body, in your health, right? Are you setting aside time in your calendar? If Tim if Tim calls you up and says, "Hey, send me your calendar, send me a screenshot," I love that old adage: "Show me your calendar, and I'll show you your priorities." Right? We talked about bank account as well, but show me your calendar, and I'll show you your priorities. If you're finding yourself out of balance, it's because you have prioritized other things over the balanced lifestyle, right? You have something that's out of balance, and it's out of balance most likely in your calendar. And you can look at that pretty quickly. Another example of something that I do is I actually, and this may sound robotic, Tim, but I actually calendar out relationship time, connection time with my wife and my son. I calendar it out. Now I can move and drop and move that around the time, right? Instead of 8 a.m., becomes noon or becomes 6 p.m. That's okay. But I do not delete that time out of my calendar. There's always that connection time. There's time I set for relationships. I call it ping, P-I-N-G. That's just my terminology. But during that time, I'm reaching out to old and new friends. And so each day I have that. So I know in relationships, in the area of relationships, which I've struggled with in the past, because running multiple businesses, something, you think something has to give. That's what everybody used to tell you. And if you actually, and then you look up, right? Everybody's done this. You put your head down, you grind it out, you're supposed to work. And then a year or two later, you look up and you're like, well, where are my friends? Where are these people? They don't know me anymore. And so I've made a conscious decision to make sure that I check in with them and make sure that they're okay. Especially when you look at things like Anthony Bourdain committing suicide or Kate Spade. And those are just celebrities that have come up in the news recently as we're recording this. But you think about all these other people that we know that might be going through a hard time, and I could tell you how bad I would feel if I know that I was my selfishness just sitting by, but not just reaching out to them to see how they're doing, would really affect me. So that's a real quick and dirty kind of 10-minute or whatever, 5 minutes, how long that was, idea of how I start doing it is show me your calendar and I'll show you your priorities. And how do you achieve balance is by looking at all those sections and wherever those sections are to you and those roles in your life. And are those in your calendar?
I love that. I love that. I'm a big believer in the calendar, obviously, hence why I asked you. And it's so simple, isn't it? It's so simple, but it's also something that is so overlooked too. I know a lot of the men that come into the activation method, one of the reasons why they resist the calendar is because they want to resist the structure. But at the same time, like you and I both know, that's key. But here's something that I think is such an amazing facet to include on this conversation. So you do your priorities, you put them in the calendar, you have your relationship time. Achieving work-life balance, in my opinion, often goes towards feeling fulfilled. The real question is, how do I feel fulfilled and happy, isn't it? That's kind of like the real question.
Yep.
So how do you then make sure that those things, those items in your calendar don't always become something to do and sometimes something to be?
Great question. Again, we could go on for hours about these to really do a deep dive. I'm going to try to condense it as quickly as I can. So you said something very poignant that I think people should realize. And this is something, again, that I struggled with. And if you've listened to this show for any length of time, you're going to hear me say that a lot because, I struggled with a lot. I was, stoic, kind of more very much on the alpha side. Like I'm just going to go through and push through anything. And I can still call upon that. But with calendars, right? With schedules, I saw that as an imposition on my freedom. Structure. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm an adventurer. I don't want structure. Well, what I found is within that structure creates freedom, creates pleasure, right? It allows me to play with both masculine and feminine energy at the same time with the creative energy and the structure. So what I found is when I'm calendaring those things out that I want to do, that I desire to do, that's when it doesn't become just a thing to do. Now, are there times when I look at my calendar and I'm like, I don't want to reach out to 10 people today. I just don't want to do it. I'm tired. My son, who's 1 year old, is was up all night like he was the other night. And, yeah, those come up. Absolutely. But I can tell you what, it's the outcome. It's the outcome that I'm desiring, right? When we follow that very simple methodology, be, do, have, right? And we haven't talked about it in this show, but Tim, I know you're very familiar with that. First, you be the person, then you do the action, then you get the result. So many people want to get the result, then they're like, when I get the result, when I get paid more, then I'll have X, Y, and Z, a new car, then I can be the man or whatever it is. That's not the way it works. It's be the man first, do the work and have the car. So I'm just using that as an example, but it also goes in with your calendar and what you're doing, right? Be that person, right? Be that person that reaches out. I know that when I'm tired and I don't want to do this show or record or whatever it may be, but I know that serves my greater why, my greater purpose that pulls me into it. And energetically over time, you'll be able to figure out what are drainers and what are fillers. And what I mean by that are, what are those things that are draining you of energy and what are those things that are filling you up? And if you find that connecting with your partner is draining you, well, that's a red flag, right? That's a major red flag. Now, if it does it once, all right, but note it. And if it does it repeatedly, really you want to watch it. So another example for someone listening to this in the area of relationships, my idea of reaching out to 10 people a day might just sound like, whoa, I have no interest in that at all. And if they do it and they say, I'm going to do it because, Doug and Tim recommended it, or Doug recommended it, I won't put it on your plate, Tim, but, which I'm not, by the way, then they do it. And they say you do it for a course of a week. And you just notice after the end of every session of your reaching out to old friends, it just drains you. It just sucks you dry. That's a drainer. That's not something you should be doing. That is not filling your cup. That is not filling you up. Energetically, you will just know. You'll be able to figure that out right away. When we do these shows and, I say this every time, I wish we would record earlier and hear our conversations because there's such a depth that most people don't have. But, I share with you things like I haven't slept in a day because my son was up, but when I get on this show and I talk to you, my energy goes through the roof. I love it. I walk away from these recordings just filled to the rim, right? I have energy all the rest of the day. Well, that's a sign to me that this is something I should be doing more of, not less. But conversely, if I started doing bookkeeping, Tim, if I started doing my own bookkeeping, I'd be sleeping here on the ground right now. I just wouldn't even be able to make it through. And again, that's a sign of something that I get to either change the way I do it or move forward onto something else.
Wow, such a great point. Such a really, really great point. And I think one of the key things to add there is flexibility. One of the things that we talk about a lot in the activation method is being focused on the what and the why and flowing with the how. I know that one of the mistakes that I used to make, and a common mistake of a lot of the men that we work with, is they get married to the how. And they get married to doing what they've said they're going to do, because if they don't follow through with what they said they were going to follow through with, then they feel like a failure. But things change. What if you have mapped out an entire strategy that's going to go on for, a few months? Things may change. So it's about being able to pivot. And another thing that feeds into this, in my opinion, is the pace of life that you live with. Because if you're living too fast and too hard, then it's very difficult for you to be able to actually have the space in your life to reflect and realize that, this doesn't feel quite right, so I'm going to pivot and change direction. And just being able to have that flexibility with yourself without beating yourself up, and being focused on the what and the why, so you still achieve the outcome that you desire, has been a game changer for me. And I know it's been such a game changer for a lot of the men we work with, because it instantly relieves the pressure. One of the things that causes a lot of stress for them is that their plates become so full of things that used to be a yes, and they're now a no.
Yeah.
But to be out of, old definitions of what it means to be a man and be successful, persevere and hustle and grind, they, out of pride, they don't want to just, surrender and say, do you know what? That thing over there actually is a drainer. It's no longer a filler. So I'm going to just get rid of that. I'm going to either eliminate, automate, or delegate. That's one of the things we talk about as well. And yeah, I think it's such a key element to be able to be mindful of the pace of life that you live with. If you are living too fast, without a schedule, rushing from one thing to another, without having any actual time segments in for certain things, and being unaware of what it is, the outcome that you wanted to get, then you get lost in the how and everything becomes something to do. And whilst everything is something to do, you're living in your head, and it's very, very difficult, damn near impossible, for you to feel anything apart from typically fear, to be honest.
Yeah.
And, like I said, how to achieve work-life balance? The real question, in my opinion, is how do I experience fulfillment and happiness? Which comes from achieving in all areas of my life. And part of that, part of it is down to the scheduling and the tactics and, reviewing the actual tasks that you're doing in your day. The other side of it, in my opinion, is looking at the energy in which you are operating from and the space that you're coming from. Because if you just try to do one without the other, it'll just never work.
You're 100% correct, and you stole the thing I was going to add on right there. Is dang it, it's I've learned as I've gotten older, and that energetic flow is everything. There's certain things I use the word fill you up, but you're 100% correct. Is your energy, how your energy is going to tell you what that really means to you. Now, there's a lot of people that want to say that they want a lot of great friendships, right? But when they actually hang out with their friends or they come back from a guy's trip or whatever it may be, they're drained. That's a sign. You got to remember, we're always changing. Tim, you and I and people listening, we're not the same people we were, 10 years ago, a week ago. If we're growing, right? If you're even listening to just this show and doing those things we're putting forth, you are a new person, right? You're different. And, and you and I were talking about this offline to some of the men, is your significant other has changed since you've married them or since you started dating them. They're different. The things that you probably or may have thought that they had opinions about, whether it be politics, religion, relationships, what you do and how you act, they change and evolve as well. And so do we. And so sticking to that calendar and keep adding on, you don't have to do that to achieve a work-life balance. Start with the outcomes first. Again, I would say start at the outcomes in those categories so you have a balance. And balance to you might be different, right? Tim is training for a triathlon at the moment. He's going to be competing at a very high level. And so his balance, so to speak, in the area of health, he's going to be putting in more time than, say, an executive who's in great shape who just wants to maintain. And that's okay. They don't all have to be equal pieces of a pie. And I think that's a common mistake that people think of, like, oh, if I need balance, and so I got 10 things, work, all these things, relationships, wealth, these 10 areas, and each of them gets 10%. No, that's not balance. That's not really what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is balance in the terms that you are adding enough to fill you up and those that you care about, of course, but fill your cup up enough that you're not just retreating to one area that you feel secure in. And oftentimes, let's just call it out, it's business, right? For most of us high achieving men, especially, and women listening to this. High achievers, we tend to turn to business often, especially men, because it's an area we get significance in. We also can get connection in that area. It's an area we compete in, and we do it out of fear, frankly. There's a lot of fear of scarcity, and we turn to business to try to fill that void. And so that's another thing to really consider. If I look at your calendar and see that you're getting up at 6 a.m. to be first into the work, and you're not in the office, you're not leaving till 6 p.m. every day, there's a problem. I run 6 companies and I don't work nearly as much as I used to when I only owned one, because there's efficiencies in those systems. There's mindset that gets to play in there. And I think oftentimes people miss that.
Amazing. Amazing.
Hey guys, I wanted to interrupt this episode because I wanted to talk to you about how almost 300 men are already taking control of their lives. They're 4Xing their business revenues and they're having more connected, intimate sex using the activation method, all without sacrificing their relationships or their health. Now, this is only an 11-minute case study we put together just based on all the feedback we've gotten from you listeners. To get the case study, all you have to do is go over to thepowerfulman.com/number 11. So that's thepowerfulman.com/11. And you can get that case study right now. It's short, it's right to the point, and it's going to give you actionable points that you can take right today. All right, let's get back to the episode.
You know, as you were talking then, there was something that was coming to me. Being strong means being able to tolerate less pain. And what I mean by that is I was speaking to one of the guys in the inner circle about a couple of hours ago before the show. And we were just, he was actually laughing about how easy things were becoming for him. And he was laughing because he was realizing the importance of operating in his zone, fillers, drainers, and then having everybody within his organization operate in their zone too. And when he chooses to operate in his zone and only does what fills him up, not only is that the best thing for the company and gives the best results, but it also helps him to achieve more of a work-life balance. And it feels so easy. And one of the things when you start to operate in that way, a couple of things happen. One is it's a massive, massive act of self-love because you're putting your needs first and doing it in an ethical way, for the good of the organization, for the good of yourself, for the good of your relationships, sort of from an egotistical perspective. And it flies in the face of what we've been taught to believe a lot, which is to take pride in the struggle. And the more pain that you can tolerate, the more worthy the victory is. But all that then happens is you arrive at the destination beaten, battered, and bruised. And we both know, we speak about this a lot, there's one destination and two journeys. The other path to that is to arrive there with a smile on your face. And, when you're able to really lower your pain threshold and become less tolerant to the amount of pain that you have in your life, that means that you've really been in this process of getting rid of those drainers more and more and more and more. And the more you get rid of them, and the more you obviously conversely have the fillers, the more addictive it becomes. And as a result of that, the less pain you then can tolerate. And one of the exact things he was saying is, wow, I cannot believe how I've been telling myself these stories of how I must have to struggle on my own and it's a good sign to bear the burden of success and I must work hard for something. This is a guy that used to work 70 hours a week. 70 hours a week, running various different restaurant chains, got a hotel, got some other businesses. He's a really successful guy, a poignant figure in his community. And yeah, even him having the awareness and the realization that, wow, I actually don't have to work this hard. It's okay. It's okay for it to be easy. And that's kind of the mindset that he's retraining himself with. And yeah, in terms of achieving work-life balance, is reaping the rewards in all areas of his life.
That's beautiful, Ed. And so, Tim, with that, you're talking about not tolerating pain as much. Do you think that when we talk about the work-life balance ratio, and obviously people need to figure out what that means for them, and that's a whole nother conversation. But do you think that people dive in, like we're talking about men here? Let's just talk about men. That men dive into tolerating more pain as a result of not having work-life balance, or do you think that they don't have work-life balance, therefore they accept more pain? It's a chicken or the egg question.
So I think that a lot of the men that I have worked with, they have you spoke about this a while ago, they have basically become the man that they are today by default. It's been a very unconscious decision for them to be experiencing the life that they have currently got. What I mean by that is, yes, they consciously have been driven to achieve, but what they don't realize is they've been driven to achieve at all costs in order to prove their worth as a man. And part of that means then tolerating pain and doing whatever it takes and persevering and pushing and grinding and hustling and forcing and, smashing down obstacles and taking pride in the struggle, all those things. And I don't really believe they've ever had a great deal of balance in their life ever since, starting out in work. And as a result, a lot of the fear that's been driving their behavior has meant that they have put their needs last. They're not used to putting their needs first. They're not used to being happy. They've just been taught to suppress emotion and suppress feeling. A lot of the feelings have been taught to suppress to start with, typically are heavier ones like sadness, anger, shame, guilt, all those things. But if you're blocking those, you're going to block happiness and excitement and all the light ones too. So chicken and the egg, I think for a lot of them, they don't even consider work-life balance until it becomes a real pain in their life, at which point they're stuck out there in that hamster wheel of hustle, afraid to get off it, because does that mean I'm going to lose everything? Does that mean that, do I actually not want my business? Do I actually, a lot of question marks are there for them, aren't they? But ultimately, and this is a little bit of a segue, but ultimately one of the things, in my opinion, that you get to become aware of and really work on in order to achieve a work-life balance is your self-love. Because if you don't have that self-love, if you don't prioritize your needs first, then how are you ever going to get that work-life balance?
So true. Yeah. No, and a journey that all of us get to go on more often, right, is self-love. And coming in there and really making sure that we're taking care of ourselves. So one of the things that you mentioned that came to mind, I'm thinking of, if I'm a man, listening to this, I'm not going to associate a business owner or an executive or somebody at a high level of management. And I'm listening to this, I'm thinking, okay, this is great. I got my categories. I'm listing this out. I agree with everything Tim says, but I got a lot of work to do. I got a lot of work to do, every day. And I know the man that you're speaking of, and in similar conversation earlier, and of course we won't mention his name, but I've got a lot to do. There's a lot that has to be done. There's bookkeeping, I got to look at the managers. I got this. So one thing I was thinking of as a takeaway that some of these men can do right now, right after this recording, right after forwarding this to their friends, of course, but right after this recording is, and you and I have spoken about this, and I got this from somebody else, is what would happen if you got injured, right? And this happens all the time. It's happened to me, Tim, where I was somewhere, I was at a pool. Someone thought it'd be funny to push me in the pool, but actually flipped me over and I smacked my head, cracked my skull open, and I was out. I couldn't work the 40 hours a week or whatever. I could only really do a couple hours a week, of getting in while I was recovering. It was really a life or death situation for me. But that came out of this question of, what if I said that, something was going to happen to you? And Tim, we can pose this to you and I back and forth. But what if you could only work 2 hours a day? That was it. You were limited. Things happen in life, guys. And it's unfortunate, but we all know people it's happened to. And I'm sure we can all think of somebody. And it's the unfortunate part. We bury that in the bottom of our consciousness because we don't want to think about it. But what if you could only work 2 hours a day? What would you do? What are the items that you would do to significantly move the needle in your business or what you're doing, and to maintain your job, to maintain the performance that's going on? 2 hours a day, what would you do? Now, once you've written that out, and be serious about it, right? Once you've written that out, of these are the things to do. And this was a hard exercise for me to do when I first did it, 15 years ago, maybe at this point. Or maybe not quite as long. and writing this out of what are those things that I would do, and then looking at it. And then, of course, the next question, which I know you're laughing at, and Tim and I can see each other via video right now, so it's kind of funny, is why aren't you doing those? Why aren't those the first 2 hours of your day? Right? Because if you're like me and you list these out, you only have 2 hours. And I already gave you the punchline, which is harder to do, but you've listed these things out. You only have 2 hours. If you take this exercise seriously, like really seriously, like you're not going to get that third hour. You got 2. What I found, Tim, was I could get, kind of the Pareto principle, as I can get 80% plus of the results I wanted out of my workday with just those 2 hours. And some of that was delegating, some of that was training staff. But most of the things that really I was doing that were significant to the business outcomes that I wanted only took a few hours for me to do. And that was a paradigm shift for me. When we talk about work-life balance, that frees up a lot of time. Now, you can still work and still grow your business if you choose to. But if your excuse is you don't have the time, that's just bullshit. And I'm going to call that out right now.
And then it becomes a question of, fuck, what do I do with all this time I've got free?
And now there's...
now it becomes, oh, wow, retraining yourself to live a different pace of life. Or start another business, or whatever it is. But yeah, it's amazing. It's such an amazing question. And I've not heard that for such a long time. And I'm glad, though. I'm really glad that I could answer it when you were asking it in my mind. I knew the answer. And then I did think, well, why would I work more? But well,
you and I often call it your zone of genius, right? That's when you and I are talking back and forth. It's hey, I'm setting aside time to be in my zone of genius. But it's a similar idea. You've transcended that level, and now it's just a different label for you to do. And then after that 2 hours, it becomes play in your business. Not that 2 hours isn't play, because it can be, right? But the rest of the day, should you choose to keep working, can be play. It can be creative play, as if, that's the great thing about me having a 1-year-old son, is that's his life. Eat, sleep, play. And now I can take that same attitude to my business life and take it to my relationships. As I take a lot of vacations and a lot of trips with my family and things like that. But if I can do that, but now I can also play in my business. So if I choose to work a 6, 8, 12-hour day and I get that 2 hours done, the rest is play for me. And that's amazing.
Wow. I never knew that the question would go all these different directions. There's been so many nuggets from... And what I love about this particular episode is we've spoken very much about the internal and external, haven't we? Tools, tips, techniques that are practical and you can use. And then also some of the internal aspects that may be driving your behavior that you may not have realized or considered, but are also so key too. So I'm really glad I asked the question. I mean, I've personally taken a lot away from this conversation. So thank you very much.
Yeah, well, thank you. I mean, I always take a lot from our conversations, and your presence alone always leaves me a better man, and I appreciate you. But something else, and I would like to ask the people listening to this to reach out to us. Let us know what you get from these conversations. Let us know what you can add as well. I'll speak for Tim that we're always learning, always growing. We're on that path, and we have been for a very, very long time. So I want to know, I encourage you, reach out. Don't be shy. Reach out and let us know what you got from this talk, this conversation. And if there's something you'd like to add, let us know.
Yeah, for sure. And just a general reminder as well, you might want to head over to the Activation Method Facebook group. That's where Doug and I are very active. We've got a private community there of business owners, businessmen, and we share a lot of trainings in there on a weekly basis. So if you want to become more involved with Doug and I and the Powerful Man, then please head over to there and check it out. And yeah, it's an absolute honor to deliver these shows to you guys on a weekly basis.
Absolutely. Well, Tim, thank you so much again. I can't emphasize enough how much I appreciate these conversations.
Likewise.
right, everyone, have a fantastic week, and we'll see you again soon.